this cityscape of the medieval city of Bern in Switzerland is a great subject for drawing cityscapes. It's actually an easier drawing than it looks from the reference. And it's a great example for a realistic style which can still be done with a relaxed and fairly quick drawing technique. So let me explain 9 steps in this drawing, and I suggest that if you want to draw it yourself, that you don't draw it first, that you just watch the demo and listen to the 9 steps that I go through, and then have a go drawing it yourself. You'll find the reference photo on my channel community page, so you can have a really good look at it when you draw and really focus on putting these 9 steps into practice. You're watching this at double speed, so if you want to watch it at drawing speed, you can slow the video down to half speed and you'll see it. Now, the first step is to, after having had a good look at the reference, of course, and see what's involved, is to start with an area that's closer, preferably in the center, and work hard, go slower, to really capture the architecture that we draw accurately. Now, even in a scene such as this, we don't want to overwhelm it with detail, because the cityscape itself, with so many details, will have a lot of detail. And we want to create a sense of different parts of the drawing, closer, mid-ground, further away, far distance. So focus on some detail with these closest points, because these will help people when they look at our drawing to be able to see clearly and quickly what they're looking at, what sort of buildings they are, maybe even guess from the architecture the city, or at least the country that it's in. The important thing, though, is that we show restraint with the amount of detail that we draw, because it's going to be hard at this stage to judge what detail is necessary. For instance, I could have started doing lines and marks to represent the shingles or the tiles on the roofs, but I decided to leave it till last before I made that decision. And when I got to the end of the drawing, I felt that it would just clutter things up and actually make it harder to read the overall scene from my drawing. And so we don't want to go too far with the detail, but equally, we do want to do enough detail, such as these dormer windows, in these closest parts, because we're not going to be doing anywhere near that detail for these same architectural elements further away. Now, the second point is the buildings that are in our main viewing spot, which are going to be sort of the closer ones, and they're probably going to be lower down in our drawing. We want to keep them nice and clean, as I said before, so they're easy to recognize. So, particularly if we're drawing directly in ink and we can't erase any lines, we want to do nice, short, smooth, brisk lines at the right angle first go. The third point is we want to use lights and darks to help separate things out, whether they're buildings or different elements. Now, in this drawing, all of the trees that we can see coming up at in different parts of the scene, some of them are large trees, some of them are smaller trees, that we want to capture that and use value, which is just an art word for lights and darks, to help separate out the architecture. And that will help us read the architecture, understand what we're looking at more easily if it's not all jumbled together. So always take advantage of things that, I think of these things as like a fire break in our drawing, a bit of separation that helps us get clarity with what we're looking at. It means that a very quite complicated scene can actually be not a tangle when we look at the drawing. So that's quite important for a cityscape, I think. The fourth point is actually about the trees. They're pretty common to find in a cityscape, unless we're drawing a modern CBD of all skyscrapers, then it's quite common to have large established trees in between our buildings. Now, that's great because we draw the trees clearly with very different marks than the ones we use for our buildings. And so This contrast provides interest, it helps us separate the different areas, and it lets us add different values. So we want to make sure that our trees aren't drawn with any less care than our architecture. We clearly will be drawing the architecture with care, but the trees are just as important, or any other of what I call the support acts. Now, another thing when we have buildings such as these, this sort of old European cityscapes, and particularly where the ground is not flat, it's to, when we have roof lines, to, if you like, get the backbone of the roof lines where they approximately move in a row. Now, the row may be going up and down or round and round, but to get those roof lines lined up at the right angle, the right heights in relationship to each other that we have in the reference. Because that roof line of the tops of all the roofs, where the roofs bend over to go down the other side, they become a rough line that our eyes again can follow. And besides the fact that it helps give clarity to what we're looking at, it also leads anyone looking at our drawing through the drawing, because our eyes will tend to follow, when we look at the drawing, those roof lines as they snake their way back and forth through our drawing. You see now that I'm doing some further away buildings, and I'm keeping the detail a little bit lighter, a little bit more simple. My next point is, be aware that in this sort of scene, the tempo we want is a slow and careful start, but then we speed up the speed with which we draw as the drawing progresses. What this means is that our lines become more lively. They have more energy, more quickly drawn. They have more variation and preferably, as I said, a lightness to them, which helps them feel further away. And also, if we're drawing more quickly, we're not going to draw the detail overly precisely, because precision, again, it attracts the eyes. And if something's further away, then we want it to sit further back. We don't want to feel that it's very close, and detail makes things feel closer. So if you look at this building now that I'm doing, I can see a whole lot more detail in the reference than I'm drawing. I want to really simplify it down to the basics. The next point, angles are really important, whatever angles we have. And so with these first buildings that we draw, the angles of the roof lines, whether it's the top line of the roof or whether it's the sides, depending what angle we're looking at the building from. But we need to pay real attention when we establish the angles. That's really important. And any perspective angles that we have, where we have rows of buildings moving away from us, and so the lines angle down one way or the other, we want to make sure we get those angles correct as well. Because if they're not quite right, they'll make our drawing look not quite right. Even if the person looking at it can't work out why, they'll just be able to tell that this isn't very realistic. The next point is scale. Now, scale is the relative size of one object to another. So if I have a building further up in my view, which means it's further away, and if I were to get a ruler on my reference and measure it, it's half the height of something I've already drawn. Say it's half the height of a roof of a building in the foreground. Then however large I draw that foreground roof in my drawing, I want that building in my drawing to be half that height. It's keeping the relative proportions of all the different elements the same. And so when we start drawing a new part, and if you look at what I'm drawing now, this row of houses that go along that I'm drawing from right to left, that's a new part of this scene. And so I particularly focus on the proportions of the first building in that, and that then sets me up to be able to go right along that line more quickly, being careful to preserve whatever angles, perspective angles I might need to have. That helps me keep the size, the scale, the relative size, the scale to other things I've already drawn correct. Now, the next point, and this is really important, but it's really easy to do too, I often see it not done in drawings, and I'm not sure why, because it's so easy, and that is alignment. When I'm starting a new section, then it's very important to align what I do with what I've already done. Now, we do that firstly in the reference. So let's say I was going to draw that church spire, the medieval church spire in the background. I would line up where the top of that spire is with something that I've drawn in more detail lower down already. I'd look at it in the reference first and think, okay, well, the tip of this spire is just to the left of this chimney that's down at the bottom. So therefore, I will start this spire in my drawing just to the left of that same chimney. Now, this clearly depends on us being relatively accurate in what we've drawn already. But if we keep aligning from what we've drawn down the bottom as we move upwards, then it works really nicely. And when I'm doing the center, so when I'm doing those buildings I've just drawn now, for instance, before I began to draw them, I looked downwards and saw what details in the reference of those first houses I drew, that house was above. And then in my drawing, I checked to see if it was the same. Now, sometimes we have to make little adjustments in our drawing because it doesn't quite line up exactly as in the photo, and that's fine. But it helps us keep things overall looking accurate and looking realistic. And alignment works the same horizontally. If I'm doing something on the left-hand side, say, and I've already drawn things on the right-hand side, I can align with what I've already drawn in the reference and then use that alignment to match up the horizontal elements, the vertical heights, measurements, whatever, with what I've already drawn on the other side in my drawing. And look, this next point, this is actually a bit of a bonus point for you, so I hope you appreciate it, but that's this. If you make a mistake, like if you make a line that's clearly wrong, don't be tempted to try and fix it straight away. Because in a scene such as this, we want a fairly light approach to all of the line work. And if I start trying to correct a mistake early, what I can end up doing is have a lot more ink in one place than I really want. That will attract people's viewing to that place, when in fact that's the last place I want them to be looking at if I've got a covered up mistake there. So what I want to do is just to leave it for now, finish the drawing, and then when I can see the overall drawing and the balance of line work and lights and darks and the sort of detail I've added elsewhere, I can work out, am I better off just leaving it, because sometimes that's the better option, or is there a light or a gentle correction I can make on it? And if there is, then I can do that. And I've drawn this with a 0.3, 0.2 and 0.1 millimeter fine liners, going to finer ones as what I'm drawing moves further away. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Hope this was interesting. Hope you give it a go now that you've seen the demo. As I said, you'll find the reference photo on my channel community page. But hey, whatever you draw, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.